Hello and welcome to this Institute for Strategic Leadership Business Forum. I'm Andrew Patterson. To support leaders as we navigate these unprecedented times, ISL has created this weekly Leaders Forum. We want to provide a learning community where panellists share their experience and insights as we move from business as usual to leadership in crisis. This week, we're focusing on the local government sector to discuss how they've adapted their leadership style to this new operating paradigm, how they're maintaining alignment and unity of their executive team, given the diversity of activity that local government undertakes. And finally, we'll be taking your questions from our online audience, and I'll tell you how to do that shortly. But firstly, let me introduce our panellists joining us today. Firstly, Jacqui Weatherill joins us from Victoria, Australia, where she's the CEO of Stonnington Council, and council in inner southeast Melbourne, a role that she's held for just under a year. Jacqui has more than 20 years experience as a senior executive with not-for-profit organisations, local government and the broader public sector. Jacqui, welcome to you. Marty Grenfell is CEO of the Tauranga City Council, a role he's held since 2018. Previous roles in local government have included CEO at Whakatane District Council and General Manager Community Services at the Hutt City Council. In addition, Marty also spent a total of 20 years with the New Zealand Police. Welcome, Marty. And John Wadsworth, CEO of the Institute for Strategic Leadership. John joined ISL in 2018 after holding CEO and Executive Dean's roles, as well as several national board roles. Welcome to you all. Just before we begin, a quick message for our online audience. We do welcome and encourage your questions. If you'd like to ask our panel a question at the end of the forum, you can do it one of two ways. You can either post your question straight onto the YouTube chat, or alternatively, you can head to Slido, which many of you will be familiar with. That's www.sli.do, just note the dot is before the do, and type in the event PIN code, which is 16695. That's 16695 if you're using the Slido facility to ask your questions. They'll be passed on to our panel in the final part of the forum. We're really keen to hear from you, from as many people as possible, so don't be shy. All right, let's kick off. Let's turn to the issues, obviously, particularly that involve the important things such as how we actually maintain the change of paradigm that you've all been going through. This has been obviously central to what's occurred over the last few weeks, this needing to shift from business as usual to leadership in crisis. Perhaps, Jacqui, if you could start off and just give us a sense of the way you've handled it, the way you've adapted to it, some of the changes you've noticed about your own leadership style over that period.
Yeah, thanks for that, Andrew, and thanks for letting me be involved today. Firstly, I'd like to perhaps talk a little bit about my normal leadership style and then how I've actually had to change as a consequence of this crisis, this health crisis. I'm a really authentic, values-driven leader who believes that leadership drives culture and culture drives performance. And I strongly believe that trust is the glue that holds organisations together. So my normal style is I'm out and about around the organisation. I'm really collaborative. I'm out chatting to everybody, and I really try and build a strong culture, team orientated, empowering our people and really driving trust across the organisation. And when I saw this storm of a crisis coming at us, I was really clear with the executive that we would need to change our style. I talked about the fact that I would be more directive and having to make decisions in really short periods of time with limited information. And I also was really honest both with the executive, with management and across the organisation about the fact that I wouldn't have all the answers because I was an apprentice in this and, I'd never had to face this in my career, and that I would try my very best to provide the best decisions, but I might not always make the best decisions on reflection or in hindsight. So I undertook then to be much more directive, much more decisive, and here you've got all this volatility, things are changing on an hour-by-hour basis, and worked in that environment. And because I had trust in the organisation and I had a great leadership team, a strong management team and strong planning framework, I think it actually worked really quite well, and the organisation has achieved amazing things. But conversely, on one hand, you say, I'll be more directive, but on the other hand, once you've set that clear, concise framework and you've been directive, you've actually got to let go. You've got to let the organisation and your people go and be creative and innovative and see what they're able to achieve. And I must say the results have been overwhelmingly positive, and our people have achieved amazing things. A key part of that as well has been really clear communication. So I would say communicate lavishly. I communicated every day. I have a strong comms team here. We did a lot of videos, daily communication that went all the way from executive. The same information went down to the staff on the waste trucks and to our parks and garden staff, or if you're in childcare, all those staff got the same lots of messaging. And the messaging that came through was really simple, clear, concise and understandable. So I think for me, that really built trust in the organisation, and I've been delighted with the results that we've been able to achieve during what has been a very, very difficult time for us.
What about drawing on prior experience, Jacqui? I imagine you've obviously just had those devastating bushfires, and I wondered if this leadership in a crisis, you'd had some preparation for that, perhaps.
Yeah, I would say Victoria generally has a very strong emergency management framework and a strong approach to what we undertake. And we even have significant statutory responsibilities in this state around our relief and recovery in particular. And as a consequence, that has gone really quite well. We had a great business recovery plan here, although on reflection, it could have been better. Particularly, we even had a pandemic sub-plan when we came into this, but it assumed that there would be a vaccine. So perhaps on reflection, had we had a bit more insight, maybe that could have been better too. But at least we had a starting point. We had a good framework to work from, and I think that really helped us get through the crisis and gave our people a sense of certainty and a starting point.
Marty, what about your experience? And obviously you've spent time in the police, so you're sort of used to dealing with fairly fluid situations. How have you noted your own management style perhaps has changed in this shift in paradigms?
Well, I think, and thank you, Andrew, for the question, and thanks for the invitation to be part of this seminar. So I think it's natural in times of crisis and when people are under pressure to go very deep into their character corners. And it's really important, I think, to understand that that's a natural tendency and to check that. And the best way to check that really is to get your team together and share your thoughts and views and try and close the gap. What I've found is that there's obviously less time to make decisions, that communication is a lot more deliberate, matter of fact. There's less time to reflect, I think, on decisions and issues as they have been in the past. And it's a very, very forward-thinking, fast-moving environment that we're in. And often people interpret, I think, the directness, the matter-of-factness in ways that need support or explanation, just as Jacqui's described. So my natural tendency is, I think, to be, as a red character, forward-thinking, bigger picture. And so what I have to do is regularly check in with others, particularly the executive team working close to me, to make sure that, I guess, their needs are being met just in the way that we communicate.
In some of our previous forums, we've talked about, the impact that the crisis has created on you as a leader, and some people have talked about the fact that it's really energized them. Is this a paradigm that you've felt comfortable in, and how has it affected you personally?
Well, it is one that I'm comfortable in, and there is a tendency though to try and move too quickly, and obviously, whilst we're trying to save lives, as it is a health crisis, it's important to move quickly. But as we get on top of that, situations that will result in loss of employment, changes in service delivery, working with the community, I think it's important that we actually take a bit of time in making those decisions, because obviously once we're on top of the pandemic to a point where we can start thinking seriously about the recovery and start implementing the recovery. We just need to take small steps and not make rash decisions now that'll impact on us poorly later.
Yeah, can I just add to that? I think it was really interesting in our environment. We offered, in Victoria here in Australia, the schools are not operating normally, and so a lot of the kids are at home, and so we offered our staff the opportunity to work part-time. Particularly a lot of the female staff took that up because they had kids at home, and as a consequence that took a lot of the load off our employment expenses, which was something that we offered out there. So before we had to stand down in some areas, we offered that to staff, and it's been actually a really positive experience for them and allowed them to use their annual leave provisions and allowed us to keep more people employed.
Yeah, really good example of, the practical things that can come out of the situation. John, let's talk a bit about, mindset in this environment, particularly, for CEOs and senior leaders. What should their mindset be in an environment where they're being pulled in lots of different directions?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because ultimately economies and organizations run on a combination of underlying fundamentals, absolutely, and mindset. And so right now the fundamentals have changed for everybody. So that leaves mindset as some of the, or a really key differentiator for success. So if leaders attack this with a growth mindset, so they see the opportunity as a crisis, opportunity to drive innovation, learn fast, collaborate, think differently, act differently, it's going to drive individual organization and ultimately state and national success collectively. So it's important to approach it with the right mindset. I mean, for local government, that might be, accelerating planned infrastructure investment, partnering with local, state and central government to make things happen, thinking differently about how the city might function. I mean, there's no traffic jams in Auckland, Wellington or Tauranga now, so understanding why and bottling some of that would be useful. And enabling new activity that might not, or activity to happen in different ways through the city planning. I mean, who knows? But now is an opportunity like no other, and it's time to go into it with a very positive, open mind in terms of what the future might look like.
That segues well into the next part of this forum, which is turning to issues such as sort of maintaining the alignment and unity of your executive team, particularly given the diversity of activity that local government, we all know local government undertakes, and I guess having to sort of maintain the sense of mission, which perhaps can sometimes be easier in a crisis situation because it creates a sort of a unifying sense of purpose. But given that much of the COVID-19 response is being handled by central government in Wellington, in your case, Marty, or in Jacqui, in your case, federal government in Canberra and also state government as well. You've got this kind of dual mandate you're working to. Give us a sense of the role local government has played in responding to this crisis and where you have seen the need for leadership in your particular patches. Marty, perhaps we can start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Well, obviously there's a range of essential services that local government continues to deliver, from the two waters, the potable water, the drinking water and the wastewater, the sanitation and curbside collection, animal control, noise control, and a whole lot of other regulatory functions. And so large chunks of the organisation continue to plough on business as usual, if not intensified. At the same time, we've closed down a whole lot of public facilities, and so we have pool guards, librarians, parking wardens, basically at home, unable to do their day job. And so it's important to not only work alongside those essential services, but it's important from a human perspective to work with those that can't front up to work and do what they normally do. And look, whilst, Andrew, we might have a very diverse range of activities and services we deliver, there's one common factor, and essentially it's service to the community. And so certainly as an executive team, that's the thing that brings us together. It's that service to community and the desire to create better outcomes. And despite the fact that we're in very, very difficult situations, we need to look beyond that so that we can maintain the capability within the organisation, the motivation and drive within the organisation to be able to deliver a range of services, whatever they might be, post-lockdown, and to support the community back through a recovery phase.
Any example of a local initiative or something that you or your team have done that's kind of really impressed you through the nature of the crisis?
Yeah, well, we were fortunate that we actually had an ISL facilitated session the days before lockdown, and so already leading into the lockdown, it seemed that there'd been a degree of fracture, and we'd gone to our corners as characters, thinking how we were going to behave individually through this lockdown period. That was a great opportunity to bring us back together as a team. And so, look, we've had 2 weekly check-ins basically facilitated through the pulse of ISL, and that's really kept us close. And so we're really fortunate that as a team, we're holding together strongly. We have a common purpose, and that's really to serve and create better outcomes for the community. All our decisions essentially are framed in that.
Sounds like the ideal preparation that occurred going into the lockdown environment. Jacqui, what's been your experience in terms of maintaining alignment with your team, sense of mission, and holding things together in this very sort of remote environment?
Yeah, look, as Marty said, I mean, at the City of Stonnington, we have approximately 35 different business units, and we have everything from libraries to leisure centres to statutory planning to waste management, etc. So each of those has, fortunately for us, we had a very strong strategic planning approach, really good performance management. And as Marty said, some of our service areas have really had to ramp up. So, for example, parks and garden staff and noise complaints and local laws officers have been busier than they normally are, yet we've had to stand down in other areas. So the great thing has been, because we've had strong planning and really good performance management, those that have been able to work online, work from home and get on with the job, have just been kind of going along tickety-boo with their own local leadership. And those that have needed a lot more focus, for example, aquatic leisure centres, we've had to basically stand down a large percentage of our staff there. We've had to close those services. But it's allowed those staff to really get on and reimagine and be innovative. So, for example, our library staff, we focused on them and allowed them to look at how can they be creative. And they created online story times every day for people who were socially isolated. Story time for little kids. We've done performances online with our Chapel on Chapel space, and it's gone really well. So what I've tried to do is focus on the areas where there's a lot of change with the executive, and the areas that we haven't had as much change have been able, based on our current approach, to tick along, which has been great.
Has it surprised you actually the degree to which things have worked in this remote environment that you might have been sceptical about before the crisis?
Oh, exactly, Andrew. 8 weeks ago, if you'd said to me, all our indoor staff will be working from home and that I would have a call centre working from home successfully, I would have laughed at you, as would our staff. But their creativity has come to the fore, and I am amazed what they've been able to achieve. So we're running a council range of services to 110,000 residents effectively from home, and those essential services that need to be out in the road are out in the road.
Well, this raises an interesting point, I guess, of the role of elected members, mayors, and councillors, and how they interface in this environment. Because as we've spoken in previous forums, CEOs in the private sector rely on the support of their boards and so forth. But what's the role of those kind of key stakeholders in this environment, do you think?
Look, certainly. Fortunately, here in Victoria, their role is really quite clear from the state government, and they're basically told to kind of get out of the way from the management getting on with the day-to-day decisions and dealing with the crisis. But they've got a really important role to interface with the community and keep the narrative up with the community. And my council, actually, we had a 5-4 split, but they've been really terrific and come together and been highly supportive of me and been highly supportive of each other, and as a consequence, it's gone really well. So I'm pleased.
John, what have your observations around this area?
Yeah, I mean, it's critical. From a governance point of view, having individually elected members that represent a constituency is a unique governance environment. And, councillors are often will have their own agendas or the things that they're particularly interested in advancing. And but right now, the mayor and the councillors are key cheerleaders and decision makers. And I think there's going to be a big difference between those governance bodies that are that create sort of high trust, aligned and unified councils, and those that are littered with conflict, divisions, and party politics. So now it's really the time for elected members to unite behind a shared vision and purpose. We've seen it at a national level in New Zealand, where the stakes are much higher. So I don't see any reason why we shouldn't see that at a local level. I mean, having said that, it's inevitable that not all will agree on every decision. Not all decisions will be the right ones under pressure. But aligning to a decision once it is made and being prepared to pivot without blame when they have to is so critical. And that will ensure that they not only give the community they serve confidence, but they'll also give confidence to the chief executive and their leadership teams who have got enough of a balancing act as it is.
Marty, I guess your perspective will be slightly different because we know Tauranga has been a very, very fast-growing part of the country. I imagine that's presented some sort of financial constraints for you as well too, and some paradigms that you're having to work under. What have been some of the challenges you've faced in that area?
Well, prior to COVID, we made a public announcement about our financial situation, how dire it was. Our ability to be able to deliver our ongoing service activities and our capital program was to a degree in jeopardy prior to COVID, and so this has just compounded it. So the relationship and discussions that we're having with central government about support packages, whether it be for capital project or some sort of debt relief, is really critical to us to ensure that firstly, we have an organisation that can support the community after lockdown, and secondly, that we can continue to deliver the much needed capital program to support our growth agenda and to maintain sort of basic services. And so it is absolutely critical that we have that strong relationship and continue this discussion with central government.
Isn't that what keeps you awake at night? Marty, yes, I'll come to you to Jacqui. Is that what keeps you awake at night?
Yeah, well, I mean, local politics is interesting, and I think it's probably best described as difficult here. It's been really pleasing to see, from a central government perspective, the solidarity essentially to get on top of this thing. And so, we've got the tension between higher level community outcomes and the government direction, the local politics and the different agendas that are played strongly, the ability to, as an executive team, maintain a capable organisation, and obviously there's the stresses and the pressures and the anxiety and the uncertainty of staff that we need to manage as well. And so, to a degree, we've got to try and find the synergies of all of those various competing factors to deliver the best outcome.
Yeah, I think it reinforces for CEOs in particular and leaders generally is the importance of coming into any kind of crisis in the best possible shape you can. I mean, you come from whatever background you have, but the more barnacles you got on the boat, the harder it is. And all of us have to be fiscally responsible and make a whole range of decisions, but it's really hard if you're coming off a difficult set of challenges like you were outlining.
Indeed. All right, let's jump into some audience questions because we've had quite a few come through, and just for our audience that might be joining us and didn't catch the intro, if you want to post a question, then you're welcome to do so just by putting it into the comments section on the YouTube channel. Alternatively, if you want to post that via the Slido platform, then you're welcome to do so as well. And the instructions for that are on the screen. All right, let's jump into some of these questions. I asked, I think it's the question that comes up just about every forum, what keeps you awake at night? And Marty, we've had your response to that question. Jacqui, are you sleeping well at the moment, or what's keeping you awake in the wee small hours at the moment?
Yeah, no, I'm generally actually quite invigorated. My brain is thinking all the time. I feel like I'm in a two-speed economy. I feel like my work is really demanding and requiring a lot of me, whereas my personal life is kind of like, it feels like I've gone back to my childhood. It's so quiet. But anyway, so I wouldn't say there's anything particularly keeping me awake at night, but I do worry about how we're going to come out of this and what the future holds, because it's really that level of uncertainty. How do you lead your organisation when you're just not sure what the future's going to be? And it's one of the few times in my career I don't have a good sense of what's the next 3 months, the next 6 months, the next 12 to 18 months.
Another popular question we seem to get each forum too is, how are you managing yourselves? The self-care issue. What are you doing to keep yourself mentally healthy and physically on top of your increased workloads? Marty, is somebody who's come from a police background, I guess you're fairly used to that environment, staying fit and dealing with pressure.
Yeah, although in saying that, I don't know that our debrief processes 20 years ago were the healthiest. So I know a lot's changed since. So, and it's no secret that the glass collection has tripled around the city. So there's an indication there that obviously people are going home and having a probably another drink or extra than they normally would. But look, I think exercise is important, and exercise and switch off time. As difficult as it may be, that you've got to put the devices in the top drawer soon after you get home, otherwise it's just too much of a distraction. And I guess my other avenue, and it's probably not a very healthy one, is if I can't sleep, I get up and watch CNN and Fox, and then I look for Al Jazeera for a bit of balance, but I don't recommend that.
Jacqui, what are you doing in the self-care department?
Well, I'm a bit of a yoga devotee, and I like to meditate as well. So I've been doing more yin, which is the kind of softer, longer poses, and I've forced my husband to do it as well. So we've been having a bit of a laugh with it while we've been kind of stuck in the house together, and that's been a bit of fun.
And just following on, Jacqui, a question for you. The question is, what have you learned, I guess, during the lockdown about connecting with others, and what are your top tips for staying connected when you're dealing with a remote team?
Yeah, look, actually, while you're talking being connected, one of the best supports I've had during this is my fellow chief executives in the inner Melbourne area. So we have been connecting, particularly early on, hour by hour, day by day, and then we've had a weekly meeting, and that on a Friday afternoon for me has been a really good opportunity to have a catch up on what my colleagues are doing. And we've kind of gone in lockstep with some of the actions that we've taken on different things. So that gives you that sense of bouncing off other peers, getting a sense of weighing up your situation and then making better decisions. So that has been a really valuable thing for me in terms of keeping up with stuff. But in regards to my own team, we've just been including, for example, we've done some professional development during this, and we actually have a change consultant that comes in and does breakfast series with us. We kept doing that with Zoom while we've been going through this process. It's been fantastic because it's given us an opportunity to almost objectively analyse change in this environment. How do we reimagine what the future is going to be like, and really connect as a group while trying to kind of step away from some of the day-to-day crisis stuff.
And you've actually taken on the additional challenge of onboarding a couple of senior executives during the crisis.
Yeah, to the point where two senior executives who'd been working together for a couple of weeks had never met face to face. And then one said, I thought you were taller than you are. Anyway, it was quite funny. But yes, no, we brought two of them on, and they actually came on early and they did an outstanding job. We just kind of basically threw them right in the deep end. They haven't even had a chance to go for a proper tour around the municipality, but both of them have been fabulous. New Director of Corporate Services a new Director for Engagement and Innovation.
Yeah, nothing like coming into a crisis and being able to jump straight into the deep end. Marty, I guess a question for you: what's the most important, or sorry, what's the most difficult issue that you've had to deal with today? And secondly, do you see your organisation how do you see your organisation delivering services post the end of the lockout? Has it given you cause to sort of rethink some of your processes and ideas in the future?
Yeah, so certainly managing the expectations, I think, of community and politics, and the reality of being able to deliver on those expectations is something that I've found most difficult, and it's something as a team that we're grappling with. The fact that our continued service delivery across a range of activities and our capital program will rely on some external support is something that's playing heavily on my mind. And it's, as we approach our annual plan budget cycle, we need to build up a budget that essentially probably has a couple of scenarios. One is, if we get no support, what does that look like for the organisation, and what does it look like for our service delivery and capital program? If we get partial support from government, what is that like? So we're running scenarios, and that's consuming a lot of our thinking, what those scenarios look like for service delivery, for capital programs, but also more importantly for the organisation and the shape and form of the organisation. So we need to strike a budget technically by the 30th of June. We don't know whether or not we'll have that support confirmed or otherwise by that date. So there are the clocks are ticking on certain things, and so we need to start those conversations early so people are aware of the ramifications of support or otherwise.
John, your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think it's going to be really interesting looking forward how organisations handle return to a new normal and at what pace that occurs. And I think it's going to vary significantly by sector, depending on depending on what pressures and what impact that this has had, and what pace that they're able to recover their own organisation, their own industry from.
I wondered if Jacqui and Marty, if this crisis had highlighted areas that perhaps you hadn't sort of thought was on your mandate, but you're thinking now about areas that you perhaps could get into or become involved in, or think about how you rework as a result of insights gained in this crisis. Anything that fits into that category?
I did a workshop. I did a Zoom meeting with all our community services staff, and so we have everything from libraries to performing arts, as I said, and a whole range of services. And I was amazed how creative they were with coming up with, ways to reinvigorate the business when we come back. They talked about the fact that people would be nervous about coming back into aquatic centres, and how do we open the centres with less numbers and allow people to spread out in the facilities? How do we run our swimming lessons with less people in them? How do we ensure that elderly people perhaps come at a time when there's not other people there and they can be separated so that they don't have a concern about contamination? So I was really impressed at our own people and their capacity to think creatively about how we can restart the business, but in a more staged way. So that was really positive for me.
And Marty, I guess just on that point, if we assume that the new normal is going to be different, any thoughts that or observations that you're making about ways that you're going to perhaps change in the future?
I think, Andrew, firstly, I don't believe that council is the only organisation that has a role in both managing the lockdown but also the recovery. And I think we need to understand what our part is in that. And firstly and foremost, it's about ensuring those essential services continue to get delivered in a seamless fashion. Then as the various alert levels change, we play different component parts. And so, for example, on Tuesday, our building inspection team will be out there supporting the construction sector they'll all be tooling up on Tuesday morning and on site, and they need to understand how they can work with that sector in a new way to ensure that construction continues to develop. The question about our public facilities, our libraries, our swimming pools is something, in my view, that's probably going to be a longer term proposition. And what we need to do is obviously have that conversation with the community about what that looks like when these things open, or how long they'll stay closed for a start. And so, yeah, it's very, very dynamic. And at the various alert levels, certainly our organisation will plug back in and support private sector, the economy, community, and not-for-profit groups, basically to get back on their feet, and we'll work with them.
Yeah, to that point, I'd just add too, I think that psychosocial support for community is one of the things that is really important for local government to get in with, and ensure that we're there for our communities, because people are being socially isolated for an extended period of time. I think there's a lot of people with mental health issues that are really struggling out there at the moment, and it's how do we support them? The same as you were saying in regards to economic recovery. There's a lot of business people out there who are suffering from a psychosocial point of view as well, with all the issues that they're facing into.
Thanks, Jacqui. Well, that concludes our fourth ISL Leader Forum. I'd like to thank our panellists, Jacqui, Marty, and John, for sharing their experiences and insights with us today. And special thanks, of course, to you, our audience, for watching and participating. This live stream will be edited into bite-sized chunks and available to view on the ISL website. That's www.leadership.ac.nz in the coming days. The ISL Pulse of Leaders in New Zealand and Australia can also be accessed in the Leader Forum section of our homepage at www.leadership.ac.nz. And perhaps on that point, John, you might be able to give us some extra insight about what the Pulse has been showing this week.
Yeah, what's very, very noticeable this week is that the engagement of essential service leaders, which was like off the chart when the adrenaline was pumping and the call to action, a very purpose-led call to action, was in place about 3 or 4 weeks ago. It's dropped from an initial high in our first pulse of 81% right down to 71%, and that's a very significant drop over a week or two. Some of the things that are driving it include the mojo and sort of the level of discretionary effort that people are having the energy to put into at the moment. So we talked early on in this crisis the importance of this is a marathon, not a sprint. Important to keep an eye on the mojo. Marty and Jacqui both gave insight into terms of what they're doing there. It is critical to maintain over time, because if that level of engagement of our leaders continues to drop in the essential services, then those that are reporting to them will inevitably be impacted. On the non-essential service leader front, the engagement's relatively stable. But what's interesting is that early on, the non-essential service leaders, because they're facing quite a bit of uncertainty in terms of what this means, and particularly, well, in both private sector and not-for-profit. So we've seen early on that are very much focused on communication, assurance, the well-being of their people through that real uncertainty. And we're now beginning to see that there's an emergence of a focus on agility and adaptation and looking forward. So the non-essential services are definitely moving from assurance to action at the moment.
Thanks for that, John. Now, if you'd like to continue the discussion or raise a question from anything that's come up in the forum, then we encourage you to do so. And you can do that by joining the dedicated ISL Leader Forum LinkedIn group. To do so, just search for ISL Leader Forum in the LinkedIn search bar and make sure to select groups, click on the ISL ISL Leader Forum group and then request to join. A reminder that our next CEO Forum will be live streamed next Wednesday, a week from today, on the 29th of April at 11 a.m. Look forward to welcoming you all back to join us then for another informative half hour of insights and experience from leaders like you grappling with the challenges of these unique times. I'm Andrew Patterson for ISL.